And we're recording, and I'm so happy to reintroduce, because actually this is our second take because the Wi-Fi let us off, got in our way for a bit of a comedy Thursday yesterday, but it happens to be Friday. That's by the by. But Aiste is welcomed to the space. You are an explorer of quiet joy, which I absolutely love in your description of who you are and what you do within your journey of trying to share the love and joy that you have for yoga. So I'm looking forward to a very insightful, sort of peaceful, almost meditative conversation with you, which I'm really looking forward to. Also, in some of your posts as well, Aiste, I saw one of your films that says to move or not to move. And because of my love of theatre, that's a bit to be or not to be. But anyway, you've got a delicious surname, first of all. So rather than me trying to guess it, would you please tell us what it is?
Absolutely. It's Kalinauskite.
Lovely. You're the first Kalinauskite I've ever spoken to, and I love you for that. And it's Aiste. Aiste is the best way to introduce your first name. Is that correct?
That is right. Yes. Aiste.
Lovely. So you run Footprint Yoga, and you're all about, I think you're one of those practitioners, as I understood it, where you were putting off doing yoga for so many years, but when you did it, it completely changed your life, and that's why you're now sort of playing it forward, if you like.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I had ages really thinking about it, not doing it, coming up with all sorts of excuses to not do it or why I shouldn't do it. And then eventually what I did, I realized that I was the one depriving myself from from this joy that is yoga. So
but there's a really lovely quote which I'll share with us both, which is the idea of what's meant for you won't pass you by. But so despite your many years of trying to avoid going to the yoga class, what's so profound is that the moment you did it, it changed your life.
Yes, yeah, that is correct. And I love the quote. That's really beautiful. So yes, maybe it wasn't meant to be for many years. And and then it's finally still reached me. So yes, it's good.
So how long would you say you were running away from your own destiny?
I was running away for 7 years.
That's quite a long chase.
Yes, it is. And I just realized that in many methodologies, 7 is kind of like a magic number as well.
It is, isn't it? And every 7 years we are cellularly regenerated. Our teeth are the same, but we're a new person, which is why 7-year itches, as we know them to be, are very, very important.
Absolutely. So yes, so I ran away for 7 years and here we are.
Lovely. So how long have you been running Footprint Yoga for?
So Footprint Yoga is quite new. It's only been 1.5 years almost. But I have started teaching while I was still on training. Obviously, the people I taught knew perfectly well I was not fully qualified, and that's absolutely allowed as long as everyone knows.
But the important thing is you're fully qualified now, obviously.
Exactly. So I'm fully qualified. So since last year, July, and it's all up and running, inspiring people to move.
Lovely. Inspiring people to move. That's a lovely raison d'etre and reason for being. And I promise you at the end, we'll give you the opportunity to tell people where to find out more about you. So yes, welcome to the Good Listening To podcast. And I'm going to invite you, as I do my guests, into a space called The Clearing, where we'll talk about what that is. We'll shake your tree, let your storytelling apples fall out. In a nutshell, this is your opportunity, Aiste, to fly your kite, tell your story and amplify your brand. So first of all, I'll ask you a slightly lateral, clunky question by deliberate design. If someone just bumps into you in the street, and I sincerely hope they don't do that, and because of your spatial awareness, I'm assuming they may not. See what I did there? But what do you tend to say to people when they ask you, what do you do? So what's your favorite way of answering that question?
Well, what's my favorite way? Oh my goodness. I think my favorite way is it is to say that I spread the joy of yoga. That's my favorite way.
By the way, that was a lovely pause and well worth the wait. Yes, that's a great answer. To share my joy of yoga. Beautiful. So welcome to the clearing, Aiste. So what is a clearing like for you? So what's it look like? What's the metaphor of a clearing for you?
So for me, because yoga has a part of meditative side to it as well. I mean, meditation on its own can be its own field, and I absolutely acknowledge that. But because of that, my clearing is a mountain. It's the top of the mountain where you have the view of everything that surrounds you. So that's sort of eagle view, but also you have the grounding, because it's the mountain. It's kind of, so you have that balance in between, almost even the sky and the earth.
So I love the fact it's grounded, but it's high up, and there's a lovely sort of eagle eye, sort of soaring in the thermals way of you connecting. And I'm assuming you're barefooted because of what you do as you stand there.
Yeah, exactly.
Really grounded and connecting.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's kind of like the key things for me, and I think that sort of is in the methodology of yoga in itself anyway. So having that sort of space, having the grounding, having the support from the ground, but also actually gaining some insights. That's what I do every time you step onto the mat. I even did a post about that. Every time you step onto the mat, the person that steps off the mat isn't quite the same person that stepped onto it, because you gain things, or you lose things that are not important to you. You kind of like, gain these little insights, you shift your mood. There's so much going on.
Lovely. So if I may join you on this mountain top then, and is there a particular location for your favorite mountain? Is it from your home country, or is it from?
No, I think I would place my mountain in Scotland, just because I absolutely love the countryside. I love the scenery. Yes, there are midges, but let's just put them aside. On my mountain, there are none.
On my mountain, there are no midges. I like that. Midges are banned on Aiste's mountain. I love that.
Exactly.
And on LinkedIn, I know we share contacts in common, and people like Dave Stewart from Fresh Air Leadership. Keep telling him that you want to come to the Scottish Mountains, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time before we get you to stand there and teach him a thing or two about yoga too.
Yep.
So if I may, I'm going to join you now up on your mountainscape with a tree, which I'm going to shake, and we're going to let these storytelling apples fall out. And remember, the exercise is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where you've had 5 minutes or as long as you needed to think about 4 things that have shaped you, Aiste, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to grab your attention, and then 1 quirky or unusual fact about you we couldn't possibly know about you until you tell us. So you can go where you like. And which of those apples, how'd you like them apples, would you first like to unpack?
Well, I think I'm going to start from the beginning. And for me, the beginning is the shaping. I think that's, and I don't think that many people actually know, the bits and pieces that actually shaped my life. So I think that could be interesting for everyone. So the first one, so let's start in the beginning. When I was 12 years old, I changed schools. And because it was like a new teacher as well, I realized I do not understand maths at all. So I was really, really failing at it. I didn't like, I think I still don't like failing at things, but what it taught me that, because I didn't like it, I wanted to change it. So I pretty much taught myself maths, and well, obviously through books and so on, but so that I actually do understand it. And it took me to the point where my degree was also part with maths, which is in econometrics.
Okay, so you're either a glutton for punishment, or you're just really good at overcoming obstacles, is what I'm hearing here. Because most people, I mean, I got 14% in my first ever proper grown-up maths test, and I've never been very good at it since. But I was sort of happy to take that on the chin, whereas you've actually turned that into a specialism, have you?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So because I didn't want not to understand it, and I somehow thought that it's important to know, and to know math. So that's why I turned it around. I thought like, okay, that's it. I'm not gonna have this. I'm gonna turn it around. So I did. Yes. I didn't think of it as punishment when I was doing it. I just really wanted to learn.
Maths is a punishment for many, but not all. But lovely. So that's number one. So maths has shaped you first of all.
Yeah, exactly.
And
then the other thing that shaped me was I didn't have any friends until I was 16. Don't worry, that's not a sad story. Although at some points I did think of it as a sad story, but actually it's not for me anymore. Because that was one of the things that brought me to books, to reading, to spending the time, and enjoying reading. So this has kind of led into a lifelong, I would say, learning as well, and a lifelong love for books.
So a joy of maths and a joy of reading. Lovely.
Joy of maths and the joy of reading. Exactly. And then the next bit is in my life at university. I was a little bit short of cash, so I decided to get a job, a sort of part-time job, so I can study and also earn some money. Great idea at the start, but at one point I lost track of what was important, and I had to reevaluate. I'm glad I realized what I was doing, because my grades were going downhill. But again, I just sat down and reevaluated what's important, why I was studying, and why I was even, at university. So when I took a good look at it, perhaps these are also those metaphorical apples we're talking about. I reprioritized and finished very well, one of the top students in my final year. So that's kind of just like another overcoming obstacles. Even
so, was the need to do a job sort of at the expense of your studies? So
Exactly.
Did you manage to sort of balance both in a way that made you successful in your studies, or did you change studies because you realized your path was being wrong, or what happened?
Oh no, so I did I stayed in the path that I chose, which was the same, so econometrics. So I stayed in the same course. I reprioritized sort of how many hours I work, basically. So that was like the key thing, and also just really bringing attention to the studies themselves, as opposed to, there's a party somewhere.
And it's a sort of slight tragedy for anyone in a sort of creative endeavor that sometimes the lack of money can inhibit the creative process. And of course, that's particularly prevalent in society at the moment, where people are having to, be faced with retraining because they can't follow their creative bliss anymore. So I know we're going to wind forward later on, but what's so lovely is you have found your creative bliss in your love of yoga now, but we'll find out how you got there. So back to you and the shaping.
Yep. So my final apple is really, as we started already, it took me 7 years, my friend trying to persuade me to try a yoga class.
Oh, you had a friend by this point. I see what you're doing there.
Yeah, exactly. I only told you it's until 16. I do have friends now. So a friend of mine tried to persuade me for 7 years to try yoga, and I came up with all sorts of excuses, like I'm not flexible, I couldn't touch my toes. I don't understand all these forms. There's these Sanskrit words. I don't know what any of that means. Like, how can I attend the class? So there are, I think, all sorts of stereotypes that everyone sees in yoga. So I basically probably had all of them in my mind and came up with a bunch of excuses why I can't do it. Turns out our minds are very good at coming up with excuses.
And by the way, this type of your own attestation and your own story about what prevented you is probably very useful for your clients, because you're able to sort of completely relate to their own barriers before they come and experience it with you. So you can help them over that obstacle, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, whatever excuse you have, it's probably not true. It's only in your head, regardless of how real it seems. So
I've heard them couched before as reasonable reasons. We've all got reasonable reasons. No, that's completely reasonable. But actually, they can just really get in our own way, even though they're totally reasonable. But sometimes we can be our own worst enemy in overcoming barriers like that.
oh yes, absolutely. So so yeah, so overcoming these barriers, but then eventually through my own sort of pain and grief, I lost my mom, and at that point I learned a valuable lesson of that life is too short. So so at that point I decided not to delay any further and to actually I just thought I'll just give it a try.
So
I'll
you were sort of metaphorically, well, or literally carrying the baggage of the grief and a little bit of, psychosomatic or literal pain of the loss of your mum. And then you arrived on the mat. And then that's when things started to change.
Yes, exactly. So for me on my very first class, although I still did one of the excuses that I was not fit enough, so I attended a gym for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months trying to get myself fitter for a yoga class. So and then yes, I did arrive onto the mat. Halfway through the class my legs turned into jelly, my arms turned into jelly, so I realized that whatever I was doing in the gym didn't quite prepare me for a yoga class. But it was good. And at the end, there is always shavasana, where you sort of lie down on the mat, and that's where pretty much the magic does happen, where you integrate your practice. You're not doing anything; you're actually being on the mat. And that was the point where, for the first time in several years, I experienced a moment, a pain-free moment. And the only words I can find to describe that moment is bliss.
Beautiful. So like an epiphany of bliss when you arrived lying down meditatively in the art of yoga. And which particular sort of strand of yoga are you involved in delivering?
So I usually describe this as hatha yoga, but it's one of sort of the branches that is the widest. So it really does mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So
yes. Wonderful. And so we can move on to, if you want to, unless there's anything else you want to tell us about the epiphany of being on the mat, about what's inspired you since and at the moment.
So what inspires me? Well, I mean, that moment definitely inspired me to actually go and teach. It took still several years to actually make a final decision. I did have exactly the same doubts as I had in the beginning before starting, which is quite funny and ironic, I think. But in terms of what really does inspire me is well, yoga itself, as in that sense of going within, and learning about yourself every time you step onto the mat. So that's, to me, that iterative process is absolutely key and inspiration for me. That's why I teach. That's why I do it.
And sort of listening to your own body seems to be the main hook for you.
Absolutely. So yes, being present and listening to the body, that's the key themes, really. And then the second thing that inspires me is nature. To me, when I'm doing yoga, I sort of, in a sense, do link up or understand a little bit better or see that connection with nature as well. But I'm also talking just about, going for a walk and having that that feeling of being surrounded, whether by trees or some other greenery and so on, just having that to me.
And does the meditative process of you doing yoga also take you outdoors in your head whilst you're doing it? Do you combine the nature that you love with the art form that you're there to do?
Sometimes it depends what I'm doing. If it's more more based on the movement itself, my personal preference is to focus on my body and what is happening inside, what I'm sensing, what I'm feeling, what my thoughts are, because I think there is a little bit of a perception that people expect that if you do meditate, it's about clearing your mind of thoughts.
Yeah.
That's pretty much impossible to do. We think, I don't know, is it something like about 60,000 thoughts a day or something or thereabouts?
Yes.
So it's not about clearing your thoughts. It's about having the detachment and realization, when you're thinking, what kind of thoughts come up, and the story of it, and whether you get lost in those thoughts.
So how to declutter, if you like.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's more how to declutter, and also realize that perhaps you are not thinking every single second. Maybe there are gaps in between.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that realization. But I do bring nature in terms of some meditations. So visualization of nature. So that's And
there's a
that's
nice
why
segue.
I guess I get to the clearing.
Yes, and there's a lovely parallel, obviously, in the notion of coaching being about coming to a clearing where you declutter. So there's a real lovely resonance there with what you do and what I do, which is lovely to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what about the third thing to inspire you?
The third thing that inspires me, we touched on it in a way already. It's about my love for books. So the third thing that inspires me are writers. It's their ability to create the world of magic and the way to transport people into a completely different world. So I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter books. So J.K. Rowling's that's like the most magical transportation, or how you want to take it, into a different world, so yeah.
It brings us back to the soaring eagle as well, if you like, because there's just this lovely idea of your mind soaring when you read, as the soaring eagle of escapism, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, that's my third inspiration of things.
And what now never fails to grab your attention? So what
never fails to grab my attention? Nice scenery, usually mountains. Mountains, I will always stop for mountains. So even if I'm like, scrolling something on LinkedIn or wherever, I see mountains, it's like, that's it, stop.
Lovely. I love the recurring theme there. It's great. Beautiful.
Well, it's all linked. Everything is interlinked.
Everything's linked with nature and a mountainscape. Lovely.
And yoga. So it's all intertwined.
Lovely.
And then another one, again, linking it up. Another thing that grabs my attention is a good book. And that includes actually the smell of the new books.
Okay. So it's not the same as getting a Kindle for you. You actually want to pick it up and sense it and hold it and flick through it.
Yeah.
And there's lovely sensory vacation in the smell of a new book. I like that too.
Exactly. I mean, I do have a Kindle, but my preference is definitely for paper books. And I know it's cutting trees and so on. So I'm kind of choosing now which books I have on a Kindle and which ones I physically want to kind of touch. And
the good news is the tree that I brought with me, you haven't cut that. We're still shaking that, and the apples.
Exactly. So and it's going to stay there.
and what's one quirky or unusual fact not related to nature, books, or yoga that we couldn't possibly know about you until you tell us?
I am a snooker fan.
A snooker fan?
Yep.
That's beautifully random. It's a bit like me in ping pong. So I love that. We could and do you play, or you just like watching it?
No, I have never played in my whole life. I just enjoy watching it. I think there was a moment I believe at first I saw it in 2008 on possibly BBC, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And since then it was like, oh, I want to watch this. It's interesting. I know most people find it absolutely boring. I've been to Alexandra Palace at the Masters for the last 3 or maybe 4 years now,
I
Never
just
missed
love
it.
how deliciously lateral and random that is. But I suppose there's a pace to the game, which is tranquil,
Absolutely.
meditative. Um, yeah. So, what's your favourite colour ball on the snooker table?
Oh, oh my goodness. I think I'm gonna go for black.
And
I
that's
know
got
it's
that's got the most points attached. So,
exactly.
I think 7 points to you with no cash attached. I love that. Very good. Brilliant. So, just to really test your knowledge of snooker, then, do you have a favourite snooker player?
Oh, absolutely. Ronnie O'Sullivan. I know people either love him or hate him, but he's an absolute character, and I think the charisma he brings to the sport is just phenomenal. I mean,
And
there
we
isn't
had
really anyone even, to compare like the same league.
yeah. I had no idea we'd be doing a big shout out to Ronnie O'Sullivan in this call. I love the randomness of that fact, which is why it's exciting to ask someone about what's a lateral fact about you we couldn't possibly know. Okay, so now we're
Yeah.
going to leave the tree alone and bring you back into the clearing. So alchemy and gold we're going to talk about now. You've been giving us that in bucket loads as to what we know your alchemy and yoga practice is about. But when you are truly at purpose and in flow, what is it you most like to bring to the world, would you say?
Ooh, um, I think it would still be the same thing where we started, really. It's to bring joy. I think that's kind of like, that's why I feel my purpose is, because I think regardless of like what your circumstance is, you can find the sort of the place or space within yourself of joy and experience that. And I do include the things like, whether some tragedies in your life or things like physical pain and so on. So I do include those because, I have overcome many of those things. So I think it's possible to do for other people as well.
So out of adversity, the alchemy that you love to always seek is joy, always almost like the golden thread that you're always looking for, which is
Yeah.
there is joy to be found through
Yes,
peace of
absolutely.
through peace of movement.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yes, exactly. So yes, and it's all, yeah, it's all linked. It's all linked. Yeah. You get it, you got it right. It's all about moving, breathing, and yeah, then the meditation. That's where you kind of emerge all refreshed. So another thing I always think about is the image of a phoenix rising from the ashes. So we all
Beautiful.
have that ability to.
So there's
So
the eagle thrust. There's the eagle strand in that as well.
There's another bird.
I know a phoenix is a more of a sort of a mythical bird, but it's got a sort of eagle power to it.
Absolutely, yes.
So Aiste, you're being a real soaring eagle in what we're doing, and the phoenix that has risen above the maths ashes to do what you're now doing. So we're going to arrive at the point now where we're going to award you with a cake, which is a lovely metaphor where we're going to invite you to put a cherry on the cake. And this is open to interpretation. It can be the best inspirational quote that you've ever experienced, the best advice you've ever been given, or it could be advice you might give to your younger self. It's totally open to interpretation. But what's the cherry on the cake of this conversation you'd like to leave us with, Aiste?
So there was one sort of cherry I already shared in my post, which was the breath is magical and how important that is to have that awareness in your life. But since that's already out there, there is one more sort of cherry I have is that movement is life. So if we do stand still, and that's actually talking about the actual movements, and it's also talking about metaphorically of getting into the stage of flow and not being stagnant. So that's so my cherry is that movement is life, and everyone needs that.
And it's about the action towards and just keep going, keep moving.
Exactly. So regardless of adversity you have, or whatever is going on, it's metaphorical actions and goals. It's also actual physical movement, because without if you don't use your muscles, if you don't use your joints, you pretty much lose them.
You will seize if you don't keep moving. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So we've been listening to the lovely Aiste on Footprint Yoga is your company. If we want to find out more about you, where can we go to find out more about Aiste Kalinauskaite?
Oh, that's very good pronunciation. Very well.
I'm very happy I guessed that right. So where can we go to find out more about you?
So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. And that's by my first name and my last name, so Aiste Kalinauskaite. I do have a Facebook page, but that's kind of a little bit harder to find me.
Well, if you don't tell us what it is, we won't find it. So what is it?
That's true. So it's Aiste, which is my nickname. You see, I'm still in the process of actually creating like a footprint yoga sort of page, but that's kind of like the two places. But yeah, if you link up on LinkedIn, that's
and on your LinkedIn banner, you've got a banner, a background photograph of you doing lots of lovely poses. It looks like you're sort of outside a lift door, but you're not. I think there's
I'm not.
3 doorways.
Yeah, no, it's just a collection of photos.
And having said, I mean, I know that's a bit random, but I know I've never come out of a lift and seen you doing yoga, but that's all good. So thank you so much for talking to us here on the Good Listening To podcast. So what a pleasure talking to you. Anything else you'd like to say?
I just want to say that's been an absolute pleasure for me to be here, and thank you so much for inviting. And your podcast is great to shake these metaphorical apples and see what comes out. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure shaking you, Tree. Thank you very much indeed, Aiste, and goodbye.